The mirror had hung on the wall of the back bedroom for 31 years. Celeste Harmon knew this because she remembered the afternoon her husband Walter had put it there, August of 1993. She had been standing in the doorway watching him work, and he had asked her twice if it was level, and she had said yes both times, even though the second time was half an inch off, because he had been so particular about it, and she had been tired, and the baby had been asleep, and she had wanted to be done with the afternoon. He had never known it was crooked, or if he hadn't said. She thought about that now, standing in the same doorway 31 years later, looking at the mirror while her daughter Pam and her son Derek moved through the rest of the house with boxes and packing tape and the brisk efficiency of people who had somewhere else to be. Walter had been gone 14 months. The house on Creston Road was being sold. This had been decided at a family meeting in February, 2 months after the funeral, in the kitchen of the house in question, with coffee nobody wanted, and a real estate agent named Bryce who had brought printed comps and spoke in a voice calibrated to a particular frequency of people in grief who needed to be guided toward practical decisions. Celeste had not argued. She was 63 years old, and the house had 4 bedrooms and a yard that Walter had maintained with a devotion she had never fully understood and could not replicate. The taxes were $4,200 a year. The furnace was original to 1987. And every room held a particular quality of absence that comes when a person who animated a space is no longer in it. She had agreed to the sale. What she had not agreed to, though she had not said this aloud, was the speed of it. If you're enjoying the story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. Pam had driven up from Raleigh on a Friday night with Derek following his truck from Charlotte, and by Saturday morning, they were moving through the house with a system Celeste suspected had been discussed between them on the phone before either of them arrived. The large furniture would go to auction. The personal items would be divided. The things nobody wanted would go to the church resale shop on Dunmore Street, which Walter had supported for 20 years, and which Pam had looked up the night before confirmed it was still operating. Celeste had been assigned the back bedroom. This was presented to her as a kindness. The back bedroom was where Walter had kept his things, his books, his fishing tackle, the filing cabinet with the household records going back to 1988. It would be hard to go through. Better for her to do it herself, at her own pace, while Pam and Derek handled the rest. She understood this was also a way of keeping her out of the main operation, which moved faster, without her stopping to hold things and remember. She did not mind. The back bedroom was where she wanted to be. She had been standing in the doorway for 10 minutes before Pam appeared at the end of the hall, with a roll of packing tape around her wrist like a bracelet. "Mom, you okay?" "Fine. Do you want help there?" "No." Pam looked at her for a moment with the expression Celeste had been seeing on her daughter's face for 14 months. The careful attention of someone monitoring a situation they could not control and were trying to manage anyway. "Just call if you need anything," Pam said. Celeste went into the back bedroom and closed the door. She started with the filing cabinet because the filing cabinet was straightforward. 36 years of household records in Walter's careful hand, each folder labeled and dated. She went through them methodically, keeping the tax returns from the last 7 years, as the accountant had instructed, setting the rest in a box for shredding. She found the original mortgage documents from 1989 and the deed and the survey plat, and a folder labeled insurance that held 30 years of policy renewals, each one clipped to the previous, with a binder clip Walter had saved from somewhere. He had saved everything. Bread bag clips, rubber bands, the cardboard inserts from button-down shirts. She had teased him about it for decades. He had said waste bothered him in a way he couldn't fully explain, and she had accepted this as one of the things about him she would never entirely understand, the same way he had accepted that she bought 3 of anything she liked at the grocery store in case they discontinued it. 2 hours in, she had cleared the filing cabinet and 3 of the 4 bookshelves. She had found, on the bottom shelf behind a row of fishing guides, a coffee tin that held $47 in quarters and a note in Walter's handwriting that said parking meters. She had sat on the floor with the tin in her hands and laughed until she couldn't any more, and then she had sat quietly for a while, and then she had gotten up and kept working. The mirror was the last thing. It was large, 3 feet wide, 4 feet tall, in a frame of dark walnut that Walter had built himself in the early 90s when he'd gone through a woodworking phase that had produced, in addition to the mirror frame, a set of dining chairs with slightly uneven legs and a toy chest for Pam that was still in Pam's attic in Raleigh. The frame was heavier than it looked. Celeste knew this because she had helped Walter hang it in 1993, and she remembered the weight of it on the drive up the stairs, both of them breathing hard, Walter insisting he had it and clearly not entirely having it. She needed to get it off the wall. The auction people were coming Monday, and she had been told to have everything tagged by Sunday evening. She found the step stool in the closet and climbed up to look at the hanging hardware. 2 heavy-gauge picture hooks, the kind rated for serious weight, screwed directly into the studs. Walter had been thorough about this. He had been thorough about most things that could be measured and secured. She got her hands behind the frame on both sides and lifted. It didn't move. She adjusted her grip and tried again. The frame shifted slightly, came away from the wall perhaps half an inch, and she felt the full weight of it settle into her arms and understood immediately that she was not going to do this alone. She came out of the back bedroom and found Derek in the hallway carrying a lamp. "I need help with the mirror." Derek set the lamp down. He was 41, broad through the shoulders like his father, with Walter's way of going quiet when he was thinking about something. He followed her into the back bedroom and looked at the mirror. "Big frame," he said. "Your father built it." Derek put his hands behind the frame the way she had, lifted, and his expression changed. He set it back against the wall and looked at it. "Mom," he said, "I know. This thing weighs..." He lifted it again, testing. "This is not just wood." Pam appeared in the doorway. "What's going on?" "Feel this," Derek said. Pam crossed the room and got her hands on the frame. She pulled it away from the wall 6 inches, held it, and set it back. She and Derek looked at each other. "Mom," Pam said, "why is Dad's mirror frame too heavy?" Celeste stood in the middle of the back bedroom where Walter had kept his books and his fishing tackle and his careful records of everything that could be filed and labeled, and she looked at the mirror he had hung on the wall in August of 1993, and she said the only honest thing she had: "I have no idea. Before we go further, if you found this story today, tell us where you're watching from in the comments, and subscribe if you haven't, because what Celeste found inside that frame is going to stay with you." Derek got a flathead screwdriver from the toolkit in Walter's closet, and they lifted the frame down together, all 3 of them, and laid it face down on the bed. The backing was hardboard, the kind that came in sheets at the lumber yard, cut to fit and tacked around the perimeter with small nails. It looked original. It looked like the backing Walter would put on a mirror frame in 1993, practical and complete and exactly what you'd expect, except for the weight. Derek pressed the backing with his palm. It didn't flex the way hardboard flexed. It was too rigid, too solid. He tapped it with his knuckle, and the sound it made was not the hollow knock of a board over empty space. "There's something behind this," he said. Celeste sat on the edge of the bed. She thought about Walter hanging this mirror in August of 1993. She had been watching from the doorway. She had been tired. The baby had been asleep, which meant Derek, who had been 3 months old that summer, sleeping in the crib in the room that was now the guest room. She thought about the look on Walter's face that afternoon, the care he had taken, asking her twice if it was level. She had assumed it was the woodworker's perfectionism, the same thing that made him sand the dining chairs 4 times when 3 would have been enough. She thought about the 31 years the mirror had hung on that wall, the way Walter had dusted the frame every Saturday morning without being asked, running a cloth along the walnut in long, even strokes. She had never thought anything of it. He was tidy. He maintained things. She thought about all the things you could watch a person do for 31 years and not understand. "Open it," she said. Derek worked the nails out carefully with the screwdriver, a dozen of them around the perimeter, each one eased out without forcing, the way his father would have done it. The backing came free in one piece. Behind it was a layer of heavy canvas, wrapped and taped, the tape yellowed with age, and behind the canvas, fitted into channels Walter had routed into the inside frame, were envelopes. Not a few, many. They were arranged in order, standing upright in the channels like files in a drawer, each one sealed, each one numbered in the upper right corner in Walter's handwriting. The numbers went from 1 to 61. 61 envelopes. Pam made a sound and sat down on the floor. Derek stood with his hands at his sides, looking at his father's handwriting on the face of envelope number 1. Celeste reached into the frame and took out the first envelope. On the front, beneath the number, Walter had written 4 words. For Celeste. Start here. She did not open it immediately. She sat on the edge of the bed with the envelope in her hands and her children on either side of her. Derek standing, Pam sitting on the floor with her back against the bed frame. And none of them spoke for a while. Outside the window, the neighbor's lawnmower started up. A car went past on Creston Road. The ordinary sounds of Saturday in a neighborhood that did not know what had just changed in this room. Celeste turned the envelope over. The seal had been gummed and pressed with what looked like a wet thumb. The way Walter sealed everything, a habit she had always found slightly old-fashioned and had never once mentioned. She opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded twice in Walter's handwriting. Not the careful block letters of the filing cabinet labels. It is real handwriting, the one that appeared in birthday cards and grocery lists and the notes he left on the counter when he went out early and didn't want to wake her. Celeste, if you're reading this, you found it. I knew you would be the one. Not because you're the most likely to rearrange the furniture, but because you're the one who finishes things. I want to explain. Not all at once. That's why there are 61 of these. I started writing to you in 1987, 6 years before I built this frame. I was 34 years old, and I had just understood something about myself that I didn't have words for yet, and I needed somewhere to put it. I couldn't say it out loud. I tried a few times, and the words came out wrong, and I stopped trying and started writing instead. These letters are everything I meant to say and couldn't. Some of them are from years when we were struggling, and I didn't know how to tell you what was happening inside me. Some of them are from years when everything was fine, and I wrote anyway, because some things needed to be said even when there was no crisis requiring them. Some of them will surprise you. I'm sorry for that in advance. Not because I regret writing them, but because I know that surprise, when it involves someone you thought you knew completely, carries a particular weight. Read them in order. Take as long as you need. I love you. I have always loved you. I loved you in ways I was not always able to say correctly, and I am sorry for that, and I am grateful you stayed anyway. Walter. Celeste folded the letter and held it in her lap. The lawnmower outside went quiet. A door closed somewhere in the house. The sound of the kitchen screen door that had always closed too hard, no matter how many times Walter adjusted the spring. Derek crouched down so he was at her level. Mom, I'm all right. What does it say? She handed him the letter. He read it. He handed it to Pam. Pam read it and looked up at the frame lying open on the bed. 60 more envelopes standing in their routed channels. 31 years of things Walter had not been able to say. He wrote us letters, Pam said. Her voice had something in it Celeste hadn't heard since Pam was a teenager. All this time, he was writing letters and hiding them in the mirror. He was writing to me. Celeste said, not us, me. Pam looked at her. Read the first one again, Celeste said gently. He says it clearly. Pam read it again and nodded slowly, and Celeste watched her daughter understand something about her parents' marriage that children spent their whole lives not quite seeing, that a marriage was also a private country between two people, with its own language and its own debts, and that the border of it was not always where the children thought it was. Should we leave you alone? Derek asked. Celeste looked at the frame, at the 60 remaining envelopes, at the number 1 in Walter's handwriting on the letter she held. Not yet, she said. Sit with me a while. They stayed in the back bedroom for 2 hours. Celeste read the letters in order, taking her time with each one, and when she finished one, she sat on the bed beside her in a growing stack, and her children sat with her without speaking, which was the right thing and which she would not forget. The second letter was from 1987. Walter had been 34. She had been 32. They had been married for 7 years, and Derek had not yet been born, and Pam was 6, and the marriage had been going through what Celeste now understood, reading it, had been a harder year than she had known at the time. I have been angry this year in a way I don't know what to do with. Walter had written, not at you. I want to be clear about that. At myself, I think. at the distance between who I thought I would be at 34 and who I actually am. I watch you with Pam, and I see how clearly you love her, and I feel like I'm doing something approximately right, but not quite right, and I don't know how to close the gap. I went fishing on Saturday and sat on the bank for 3 hours and caught nothing and thought about this. I came home and you had dinner on the table and Pam was telling a story about a girl at school and you were listening to her the way you always listen, with your whole face, and I thought, this is a thing I am not doing correctly. I am present, but I am not entirely here, and I don't know how to fix it yet. I'm going to keep trying. She had not known he felt this. She had known 1987 had been a quiet year between them, a year of passing each other in the kitchen and sleeping at different hours and saying the necessary things and not many of the unnecessary ones. She had thought it was the ordinary weather of a marriage in its middle years. She had not known he was sitting on a riverbank thinking about the gap between the man he was and the man he meant to be. The third letter was from 1991, the year she had lost the pregnancy. She had known this was coming, somewhere in the stack, and she had taken a breath before she opened the envelope. I did not know what to say to you. He had written, I still don't. I stood in the hospital room and watched your face and felt completely useless, which is the worst thing a man can feel when someone he loves is suffering. I held your hand. I don't know if it helped. I hope it helped. There is something I have not told you. I cried in the car on the way home, not while you were with me, because I didn't want you to have to take care of me when you were the one who needed taking care of. But in the car, alone, I pulled over on Birchwood and sat there for 15 minutes. I am telling you this now, because I think you might have thought, then, that it didn't affect me the same way. I think you might have interpreted my quietness as distance rather than what it actually was, which was that I was holding myself together as carefully as I could, because I was afraid if I let go, neither of us would have anything to hold on to. I should have said this then. I'm sorry I didn't. Celeste set the letter down. She pressed her hand over her mouth for a moment. Then she picked it up and read the last paragraph again. 33 years. She had carried something about 1991 for 33 years. A small doubt, she had never spoken aloud, that Walter had grieved differently and therefore less. She had never asked him. He had never offered. And he had been sitting in a car on Birchwood Road, pulled over, alone for 15 minutes. Mom, Pam said quietly, I'm fine. She folded the letter. I'm absolutely fine. She did not read all 61 that afternoon. She read through envelope 17 before she stopped, not because she was overwhelmed, though she was, but because the light had changed in the room and Derek had gone quietly to the kitchen and come back with sandwiches, and Celeste realized she had been in the back bedroom for most of the day and her children were still there, sitting with her, and that was something she wanted to notice while it was happening. They ate the sandwiches. Derek told a story about Walter teaching him to drive in the parking lot of the old Kmart on Route 9, which had been demolished years ago, and how Walter had said almost nothing the entire time, just occasional course corrections delivered in a voice so calm you would not have known the car had nearly hit a curb. Pam said Walter had taught her to drive the same way, in the same parking lot, and that she had always assumed the silence meant he wasn't worried, when perhaps it had meant he was worried and managing it the same way he managed most things that frightened him. Celeste listened to them talk about their father and thought about the letters stacked on the bed beside her and thought about all the things you could know about a person and still not know. The auction people came Monday, as planned. The furniture went. The rooms emptied out over the course of 2 days in the way houses emptied. Corners first, then centers, the space between things gradually becoming the main thing. Celeste had taken the mirror frame home. It was not going to auction. This was not negotiable, and she had said so without explanation, and Pam and Derek had not asked for one. She had taken the letters, all 61 of them, in a canvas bag that had been her mother's, with a pattern of faded blue flowers on the side. She had put the bag in the passenger seat of her car and driven back to the apartment she had moved into 8 months after Walter died, a 2-bedroom on the 3rd floor of a building on Halsey Street with windows that face west and a small balcony she had not yet put anything on. She put the mirror frame against the wall in the 2nd bedroom and looked at it for a while. The walnut was still good. The joints were sound. Walter had built it to last, and it had lasted. She took the canvas bag to the kitchen table and sat down. She had 17 more letters to read. We're with Celeste at her kitchen table, and what she finds in the next letters is going to change what she thought she knew about 42 years of marriage. Subscribe now if you haven't, and drop a word in the comments. Just one word for what it would feel like to find something like this. She read 2 or 3 letters each evening after dinner, with the west light coming to the windows and the buildings settling around her in the way new buildings settled. Different sounds in the house on Creston Road, where she had known every creak and had stopped hearing them decades ago. The letters were not all heavy. This surprised her. Envelope 22 was from 1998, a Tuesday in October, and Walter had written about a fishing trip to the Holston River with his friend Carl Reedy, and about a heron he had watched for 45 minutes from the riverbank, and about how the patience required to watch a heron was the same patience required for most things worth doing, and that he had been thinking about this all the way home. I want to tell you about the heron. He had written, I got home, and you were on the phone with your mother, and then dinner, and then the news, and by the time we were in bed, I had decided it was too small a thing to bring up. I am always making that calculation, and I think I get it wrong more than I get it right. Some things seem too small to say, and turn out not to be small at all. Celeste read this and thought about all the evenings she had spent on the phone with her mother, while Walter sat at the kitchen table with his coffee. She had always assumed he was content. He probably was content. But he had also been watching a heron for 45 minutes that day and wanted to tell her about it, and deciding it was too small. She thought about how many small things they had both decided not to say. Envelope 31 was from 2003, Pam's wedding year. I walked her down the aisle this morning. Walter had written that evening. I held her arm and I felt her shaking slightly, and I thought, she's terrified. And then I thought, so am I? And then I thought, good. People should be terrified of the things that matter. I did not cry at the ceremony, which I know you noticed. I need you to know that this was an act of will. I had made myself a promise 2 days before the wedding that I was going to hold it together for her, because I know Pam, and I know she would have found it harder to see me lose it than to manage her own nerves. So I held it together. In the car on the way to the reception, I had to pull over for a few minutes. Celeste set the letter down and pressed her lips together. He had pulled over. He had pulled over in the car twice that she knew of now, both times when something had been too large for the ordinary room of the day, both times alone, both times managing the size of it, so that no one else had to manage it for him. She thought she had known the shape of him. She had known the outline. The letters were filling the interior in colors she had not expected. If you're hooked on this story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more emotional stories like this one. Envelope 44 stopped her entirely. It was from 2009. She knew what 2009 had held before she opened it. Walter's brother Raymond had died that year. A heart attack at 58. Unexpected. The kind of death that arrived without preparation and reconfigured everything after it. Walter had been close to Raymond in a way he was close to almost no one else. A closeness built from childhood and maintained through particular loyalty of brothers who had not been made alike but had liked each other anyway. She had watched Walter go quiet after Raymond died and had thought she understood it. Grief going inward, which was his way with most things. She had given him room. She had not pushed. I had been thinking about Raymond every day since March. He had written that November, not about his death, about when we were boys. There's a specific afternoon I keep returning to, 1963. We were in the field behind our mother's house. Raymond was 11 and I was 10, and he had found a box turtle and was trying to convince me that if you kept a box turtle long enough, it would learn to come when you called it. I told him that was nonsense. He told me I had no imagination. We argued about it for 20 minutes with the complete seriousness of boys who have not yet learned that most arguments are not about the thing they are ostensibly about. I don't know why I keep thinking about that afternoon, except that Raymond was so certain the turtle would learn. He believed things could be taught to come when you called them, and I spent 60 years thinking he was wrong about that, and now I'm not sure. I think some things do come when you call them. I think grief does. I think love does when you call it correctly. I miss him. I wanted to say that to you when it happened, and I couldn't find a way to say it without it becoming something larger that I wasn't ready for. I am saying it now. I miss him every day. Celeste put the letter down on the table and looked out the west-facing window at the last of the evening light. She had given him room. She had thought that was what he needed. She had not known he had been trying to find a way to say something and deciding each time that he couldn't. She thought about 31 years of the mirror on the wall. She thought about Walter running the cloth along the frame every Saturday morning. She thought about the weight of it when she had tried to lift it alone. She finished the last envelope on a Thursday in April, 5 months after she had found them. She had taken that long deliberately, not because she was avoiding the end, but because the letters had become something she looked forward to in the evenings, a conversation she was finally having with the person she had been married to for 42 years, conducted across the distance of his absence in his own handwriting, at whatever pace she needed. The 61st letter was dated November of the year before he died. He had written it 8 months before the diagnosis, which meant he had not known what was coming when he wrote it. He had written it because he had been writing to her since 1987, and the habit was too old to stop. I am 69 years old. He had written, I went fishing on Saturday and caught 3 decent brown trout and released them all because I didn't feel like cleaning them and I wanted to watch them go. They went without ceremony, which is the right way to go. I have been thinking about what I would tell you, if I could say anything, not in a morbid way, in the way you think about things when you've been alive long enough to have some perspective on them. I would tell you that the best decision I ever made was coming to your parent house on Millbrook Street in October 1978 to return a book I had borrowed from your father and finding you in the kitchen making coffee. I had not expected you. I had expected your father. I would tell you that I have not been as good at saying the right thing as I have been at knowing what the right thing was. I am aware of this gap, and I have been aware of it for most of my life. These letters have been my attempt to close it, imperfectly, in the only way I knew how. I would tell you that I love you in the specific way that comes from watching someone be themselves for 40 years. Not the idea of them, but the actual person with all the Tuesday mornings and the difficult winters and the times we said the wrong thing and the times we didn't say anything and went to sleep anyway. That kind of love is the only kind that lasts because it's made of real material. I would tell you to move the mirror someday, not because what's inside it requires action, but because something should be found while there is still time to say, I know, I understand, we are all right, I love you, Celeste. I have loved you for 44 years, and I have been writing to you for 35 of them, and I would write to you for 35 more if I had them to give. Walter. She sat at the kitchen table with the letter in her hands for a long time. Outside, the April evening was doing what April evenings did, the light going slowly from gold to pale to particular blue of almost dark, the building quiet around her in the way it was quiet on Thursday evenings, the working week winding down, people in their apartments making dinner or watching television or sitting at kitchen tables reading letters from people who had loved them and found imperfect ways to say it. Move the mirror someday. He had written that in November, 8 months before the diagnosis. He had not been planning for his death. He had been planning for her life. He had been thinking, at 69 years old, about the distance between what he knew and what he had said, and had written it down and sealed it in an envelope and hidden in the frame of a mirror he had built with his own hands, and had waited. She had moved the mirror. She had moved it because they were selling the house, because the auction people were coming Monday, because Pam and Derek had arrived with boxes and packing tape, and the practical momentum of people who had somewhere to be. She had moved it for all the ordinary reasons that had nothing to do with this. And she had found what he had left anyway, because he had known she would, because he had been watching her finish things for 42 years, and he had been certain. I knew you would be the one, not because you're the most likely to rearrange the furniture, but because you're the one who finishes things. She looked at the canvas bag on the chair beside her. 61 envelopes. 35 years of letters. The weight of marriage examined and articulated and folded in thirds and sealed in the dark behind walnut and hardboard. She thought about the gap he had written about in 1987. The distance between who he thought he would be and who he actually was. She thought he had been wrong about the gap. She thought he had been the person he meant to be in all the ways that counted. He had showed up. He had stayed. He had kept trying. He had written 61 letters to a woman he loved because he could not find the words in a room, and so he found them on paper instead. She thought that was not a gap. She thought that was a thing itself. Pam drove up the following Saturday. Not because Celeste had called her, because Pam was Pam, which meant she had been thinking about the letters since February and had reached the limit of thinking about them from a distance and had gotten in the car. She arrived at 11 in the morning with a bag of groceries and the particular expression of a person who has rehearsed a conversation and is not sure the rehearsal was adequate. Celeste made coffee, and they sat at the kitchen table, and Celeste put the canvas bag between them. "I finished them," she said. Pam looked at the bag. All 61. All 61. What were they? Celeste thought about how to answer this, not what they contained, which was 35 years of specific moments and specific feelings, and things Walter had not been able to say correctly in the room, but had been able to say on paper. What they were. They were him, she said, more him than most of what I had, which is strange because I had him for 42 years. Pam was quiet for a moment. "Can I read some of them?" "Eventually, when I'm ready." "Okay." "Not yet." "I know, Mom." They drank their coffee. Outside the west-facing window, the April morning was bright and new in the way April mornings were. The kind of brightness that felt like a claim rather than a promise. "He knew you'd find them," Pam said. He said as much in the first one. He was right. He usually was. Celeste looked at the window, just not always in the ways he thought he was being right about. Pam smiled at that. It was Walter's kind of smile, the one that appeared before the rest of the face caught up to it. "What are you to do with the frame?" Pam asked. Celeste had been thinking about this since February. The mirror itself had gone to auction with the other furniture, the mirror being the practical thing and the frame being the made thing, and she had separated them without difficulty. The frame was in the second bedroom, leaning against the wall, the routed channels empty now, the canvas backing removed, open to whatever came next. "I'm going to hang it," she said. "Just a frame? Without a mirror?" "Yes." Pam considered this. "Where?" Celeste looked at the west-facing wall of the apartment, the one that caught the light in the afternoons, the one she'd been looking at for 8 months without putting anything on it. "There," she said. Derek came the following weekend with a level and the right hardware, and he hung the frame on the west wall in the spot Celeste had marked with a small pencil dot. He asked her twice if it was level. She said yes both times, and this time she meant it. The frame hung empty on the wall. Walnut, dark-grained, built by a man who had sanded it longer than necessary and hung it more carefully than it needed to be hung and hidden 35 years of himself inside it. Celeste stood back and looked at it. The empty frame held the wall behind it, which was painted the pale cream of most rental apartment walls, and the afternoon light, which came through the west window and crossed the room in a long gold bar that moved as the day moved. When the light hit the frame at the right angle, the grain of the walnut showed itself, the long, dark lines of it, the particular patience of wood that has been worked carefully. "Mom," Derek said. He was standing in the doorway with the level under his arm, looking at the frame on the wall. "It looks right." She thought he meant level, and then she looked at his face and understood he meant something else. "It does," she said. She called Pam that evening, and they talked for an hour about Walter, about the letters, about the specific shape of a person you thought you knew and the shape of them you hadn't known, and about how those two shapes made one thing if you set them beside each other carefully. Pam asked if she was angry at him for not saying it sooner. Celeste thought about this honestly. "No," she said. "I think I would have been at some point in my life. I think at 40 I would have been angry. At 50 I might have been. But at 63, having had him for 42 years, and then not having him for 14 months, no, I'm not angry. I'm glad he found a way, even if the way was in a mirror frame. Especially that, because it's completely him. He built the thing to hold the thing. He built it himself, so he knew exactly how strong it was. He put it somewhere he could see it every day. He dusted it." She paused. "Every Saturday morning for 31 years, he dusted a frame that had his letters inside it, and he never said a word." Pam was quiet for a moment. "That's either the most patient thing I've ever heard of or the most stubborn." "With your father," Celeste said, "those were often the same thing." By the following October, Celeste had read the letters 4 times. Not consecutively. She went back to specific ones. The way you returned to specific pages in a book that had given you something you weren't done with yet. She went back to 1991 often. She went back to the letter about Raymond and the box turtle. She went back to the one about the heron and the things too small to say. She had told her neighbor Evelyn about the letters. Not the full story, but enough. Evelyn was 71, a retired schoolteacher who lived in the apartment across the hall and had been widowed for 9 years and had, in Celeste's experience of her, a direct and unsentimental relationship with large things. Evelyn had listened and said he was a smart man. He was, Celeste agreed, smarter than he thought. Probably that's the usual way. Yes. You going to write back? Celeste had looked at her. He's gone, Evelyn. I know he's gone. I'm asking if you're going to write back anyway. She had thought about this for 3 weeks after that conversation. In November, she bought a notebook, the kind with dark green cover, at the stationery shop on Halsey Street, and a pen she liked the weight of, and she sat at the kitchen table on a Tuesday evening and wrote the first letter. Walter, I found them. You knew I would. You were right about me in the way you were usually right, not loudly, but accurately, from a long distance. I want to start with 1987, because I've been thinking about what you wrote about the Gap. I want to tell you that you were wrong about the Gap. I was there in 1987, and I watched you, and what I saw was a man who did not always know what to say, but who showed up anyway, which is not a gap. It's the thing itself. But I'll tell you more about this as I go. I have 61 letters to answer, and I intend to answer all of them. I love you. I have always loved you. Celeste, she is still writing. The green notebook is half full now. Some evenings she writes 1 letter. Some evenings she writes 2. Some evenings she opens a notebook and reads what she has already written and closes again and sits with the west light coming to the window and the empty walnut frame on the wall, holding the afternoon in its grain. The letters from Walter are in the canvas bag with the blue flowers. She has put them in a fireproof box she bought at the hardware store because they are irreplaceable, and she is someone who takes care of things that cannot be replaced. The frame is on the west wall. Derek asks occasionally if she wants a mirror put in it, and she says no, not yet. She is not ready for reflection. She is still reading the light. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you love this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story. He knew you'd find them, Pam said. He said as much in the first one. He was right. He usually was. Celeste looked at the window, just not always in the ways he thought he was being right about. Pam smiled at that. It was Walter's kind of smile, the one that appeared before the rest of the face caught up to it. What are you to do with the frame? Pam asked. Celeste had been thinking about this since February. The mirror itself had gone to auction with the other furniture, the mirror being the practical thing and the frame being the made thing, and she had separated them without difficulty. The frame was in the second bedroom, leaning against the wall, the routed channels empty now, the canvas backing removed, open to whatever came next. I'm going to hang it, she said. Just a frame? Without a mirror? Yes. Pam considered this. Where? Celeste looked at the west-facing wall of the apartment, the one that caught the light in the afternoons, the one she'd been looking at for 8 months without putting anything on it. There, she said. Derek came the following weekend with a level and the right hardware, and he hung the frame on the west wall in the spot Celeste had marked with a small pencil dot. He asked her twice if it was level. She said yes both times, and this time she meant it. The frame hung empty on the wall. Walnut, dark-grained, built by a man who had sanded it longer than necessary and hung it more carefully than it needed to be hung and hidden 35 years of himself inside it. Celeste stood back and looked at it. The empty frame held the wall behind it, which was painted the pale cream of most rental apartment walls, and the afternoon light, which came through the west window and crossed the room in a long gold bar that moved as the day moved. When the light hit the frame at the right angle, the grain of the walnut showed itself, the long, dark lines of it, the particular patience of wood that has been worked carefully. Mom, Derek said. He was standing in the doorway with the level under his arm, looking at the frame on the wall. It looks right. She thought he meant level, And then she looked at his face and understood he meant something else. "It does," she said. She called Pam that evening, and they talked for an hour about Walter, about the letters, about the specific shape of a person you thought you knew and the shape of them you hadn't known, and about how those two shapes made one thing if you set them beside each other carefully. Pam asked if she was angry at him for not saying it sooner. Celeste thought about this honestly. "No," she said. "I think I would have been at some point in my life. I think at 40 I would have been angry. At 50 I might have been. But at 63, having had him for 42 years, and then not having him for 14 months, no, I'm not angry. I'm glad he found a way, even if the way was in a mirror frame. Especially that, because it's completely him. He built the thing to hold the thing. He built it himself, so he knew exactly how strong it was. He put it somewhere he could see it every day. He dusted it." She paused. "Every Saturday morning for 31 years. He dusted a frame that had his letters inside it, and he never said a word." Pam was quiet for a moment. "That's either the most patient thing I've ever heard of or the most stubborn. With your father," Celeste said, "those were often the same thing." By the following October, Celeste had read the letters 4 times. Not consecutively. She went back to specific ones. The way you return to specific pages in a book that had given you something you weren't done with yet. She went back to 1991 often. She went back to the letter about Raymond and the box turtle. She went back to the one about the heron, and the things too small to say. She had told her neighbor Evelyn about the letters. Not the full story, but enough. Evelyn was 71, a retired schoolteacher who lived in the apartment across the hall and had been widowed for 9 years and had, in Celeste's experience of her, a direct and unsentimental relationship with large things. Evelyn had listened and said he was a smart man. He was, Celeste agreed, smarter than he thought. Probably that's the usual way. "Yes. You going to write back?" Celeste had looked at her. "He's gone, Evelyn." "I know he's gone. I'm asking if you're going to write back anyway." She had thought about this for 3 weeks after that conversation. In November, she bought a notebook, the kind with dark green cover, at the stationery shop on Halsey Street, and a pen she liked the weight of, and she sat at the kitchen table on a Tuesday evening and wrote the first letter. "Walter, I found them. You knew I would. You were right about me in the way you were usually right, not loudly, but accurately, from a long distance. I want to start with 1987, because I've been thinking about what you wrote about the Gap. I want to tell you that you were wrong about the Gap. I was there in 1987, and I watched you, and what I saw was a man who did not always know what to say, but who showed up anyway, which is not a gap. It's the thing itself. But I'll tell you more about this as I go. I have 61 letters to answer, and I intend to answer all of them. I love you. I have always loved you." Celeste, she is still writing. The green notebook is half full now. Some evenings she writes 1 letter. Some evenings she writes 2. Some evenings she opens a notebook and reads what she has already written and closes again and sits with the west light coming to the window and the empty walnut frame on the wall, holding the afternoon in its grain. The letters from Walter are in the canvas bag with the blue flowers. She has put them in a fireproof box she bought at the hardware store because they are irreplaceable, and she is someone who takes care of things that cannot be replaced. The frame is on the west wall. Derek asks occasionally if she wants a mirror put in it, and she says no, not yet. She is not ready for reflection. She is still reading the light. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you love this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.